Okay, there's time for questions and plenty to ask questions about. In the back, Professor Slawinski.
Thank you. That I just dug that. That was so, both of the papers. And I have lots of questions, but I'll just ask one question of Rosalyn. It's not really a question. I just wanted to know more because I loved the kind of line you took along the Kleinian take of the bad breast, good breast, and the question of internal aggressiveness. And I wanted to sort of get you to say a little more about that in terms of the formal strategy of the monument towards war, because there's a question about how that monument embraces the bad breast of the arc, in the sense that it's creating, it would seem to me to be creating a good breast around the bad breast or something analogous. And so I'm just wondering if you can say a little more about the kind of formal way in which that monument is proposing to do the kind of psychological work that you're suggesting Fanaari, among other psychoanalytic thinkers, are offering us.
It's a very interesting question. I hadn't thought of it in, the Vedichko work in those terms. So obviously I would need to think about it more. But you're saying that, are you suggesting that the Vedichko work is doing some kind of splitting itself? Operation of splitting the arc into, bad and good object?
I think I would say maybe it's trying to integrate, because it's not against the arc. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's embracing the arc in terms of its formal structure. Right? It's as I understand, it's got scaffolding and it's creating a transparent building sort of that doesn't attempt to obscure the arc.
I think what it does is try to, and this is true of all of Vedichko's work with monuments, which are projections of various kinds. This is, he usually projects images onto monuments or spaces. In this is not exactly that. He's not using an image projection, but it's similar. He's projecting something onto that arc. I would say that what it does is bring out what the arc itself represses. That the arc, which maybe, I don't know, I'm just playing with what you're saying, that the arc sort of parades as a good object, and he brings out the arc's badness. The pathologies underlying its appearance.
Ito?
Thanks very much for 2 very fascinating lectures. I think that it might be fascinating to relate what you told us about Fanaari's ideas to the spatial setup of the monument itself, as you suggested.
Yes.
Because it seems that the relation of inside and outside of the monument is much more complex than it might seem at first glance. In fact, the, let's say, bad object or arc is being encased, and it's also to a certain extent being sublated, right? It's being conserved within its cover. And there is also one other interesting aspect going on, namely the aspect of the projection. Because you were saying that, projection takes place from the inside to the outside, sort of externalizing aggression. And in Vodichko's monument, there's also a projection taking place from the inside to the outside, as it seems from the renderings, right? I wasn't really able to see it properly. So there's a projection from the inside to the outside front glass or window, but these are different images, right? So there is a sort of transformation of imagery going on in the projection from the inside to the outside, and this seems to me to be in a very productive tension.
What do you mean by projection from the that his work projects the inside outside?
Yeah, it sort of
In what way?
translates the imagery of the relief, right? Of
When you
the-
say inside, do you mean
The
the
arc.
repressed of the arc?
Or
Or the literal inside?
The literal inside.
Okay.
Just
It sort of translates the imagery from the relief
Mm-hmm.
and transforms them into. I mean, I recognize this famous photo from the Vietnam War, right? So it creates a different projection to the outside
Mm-hmm.
of the glass encasing. So there seems to be another projection taking place from the inside to the outside, but which takes place according to a very different dynamic to the one you described. I mean, I cannot put my finger to it, no, but
Do you think, since he's talking about the arc as a metaphor for the self or for the subject, do you think that he's doing something similar?
No, because I mean, according to what you told us about Fornari's ideas, the act of externalizing aggression would be to project, internal aggression onto an external enemy, right? And this is exactly what's not being done in the monument.
Right.
Instead, somehow the spin, let's put it like this.
The what?
The spin of the projection is somehow reversed, right? And if you start off with one image of aggression, then the projection that reaches the outside of the building is something entirely different. And that's quite remarkable to me in that spatial articulation. And in fact, this also connects...
Well, would you compare this to a kind of psychoanalysis of the
No.
arc?
I have no idea about psychoanalysis.
No,
right?
of the arc.
I'm not sure. Maybe it complicates ideas about psychoanalysis in the projected structure of the building itself. Maybe there is some kind of projection going on in the spatial articulation of the building which exceeds and complicates the mechanism which you so wonderfully described. And I think that, if I may,
Please.
this also relates to a lot of what you talked about in your presentation, because the trope of projection, of course, I was so fascinated by this initial picture that I spent most of the time looking at it and wondering about what kind of projection it actually is we're seeing. But a similar kind of projection seems to take place within that image, because if you look closely, then, of course, I wonder, where does that projection come from, right? What kind of... I'm a video installation person, so you can't do this kind of projection with any kind of video projector. It's just not possible, right? So where does it come from? It comes from the top of the roof, and it is projected from very far away. So it must be at least 200 meters. And this means that this is a very, very potent device, right? It's a laser projection, which is essentially some sort of military advertisement equipment. And so, in fact, in the very articulation of this staging, of this installation, the phrase, "this is not a coup," is sort of reversed, because of course it is a coup. It is military equipment. Literally, it's laser. If you were to look into the beam of the laser, you'd be blinded, no? So I think that, projection plays a very important role in both of these cases. And through, just one sentence, through the, sorry. I came late to the conference, so I have a lot of things to say. Through the nature of the projection itself, this screen or this wall, this facade, becomes an arc de triomphe, right? It becomes an expression of a victorious system, meaning the military, basically, inscribing its triumph onto the screen of urban facades. And now I'll shut up.
Interesting, yeah.
I didn't do enough homework, and I was feeling terrible that I didn't really do I was thinking, okay, if I'm going to talk about this image, I have to find out really who was behind it, etc. I didn't really do that. All I can tell you, the little I found out was, indeed, they're lasers, but it seems slightly more chaotic than what you describe, as we know this is now a military. From what I understood, they seemed to last for about a day. There were 200 of these green lasers, And they were used to project a whole series of things, because I found other images afterwards thinking, okay, am I just particularly sick that I was laughing and thinking immediately Magritte and all of these things, is this a... but they were clearly, there were other ones that were things like game over. I mean, there was clearly some playful, humorous things, but then they did something else with these lasers, and I don't know who they is, but there was some gesture of wanting to capture, signal, or whatever, sympathy with the military. So the one incident was that a military helicopter almost crashed because they started lighting up military signifiers as though friendly, implying alliance, we're all together. It's not a coup, I don't know. But it blinded the pilot and he almost crashed.
Oh my God.
So just to say, yes, of course it goes right to military, but it may be more complicated than we know. It's just a screen.
But it's
just a
also,
monument.
I was thinking about the two projections too in our two talks, and the extreme difference between them, right? That the projection you're showing reinforces, if anything, it uses the building as a screen basically, but it doesn't question the authority of the structure onto which it's projected. It's not doing, I know you don't like, but it's psychoanalysis of the structure, the way the Vidicko project is. And I think that goes along with its being a military technology somehow.
It may not be questioning the structure. I see it as perhaps more questioning or a symptom of needing new mechanisms to question the structure. I mean, it's a contemporary transposition of we're all going to march down the street with the placard, holding the placard. So now we have to write on our bodies or on our bare breasts or on the buildings and then make sure those pictures get uploaded, right? Which is some looking for where do we, if this is all some weird, on some level, right, the pantomime of how do we do the French Revolution again, then it's what do we do instead of a placard? We can't do that. So it might be questioning how we make our claims, signal our questions. Does that make sense? As a exploration of...
I don't know. I don't think that the Vidicko thing is about making the French Revolution again at all.
No, I meant
Cairo.
this.
Oh, okay.
I meant
okay.
this.
Mm-hmm.
That if it's not questioning the structure, it may be asking questions about what is involved in the theater of questioning, of even raising questions to the existing structure. I'm not sure it's a particularly powerful gesture. I'm not defending it as...
Sorab, who I know knows about that square. So.
Hi.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for the presentations. I want to try something that I think Corey tried once, and I want to try to see if this works this time. But I feel maybe I want to try to see if I can ask Olivia to respond to Rosalyn in a way, but I'm going to try to formulate it in a way because I feel what you ended your talk with not having the prayer, or maybe there isn't a prayer. And I was curious to see how would that conception of Derrida that you were so referring to, and the idea of television, might actually, let's put it this way, how would Derrida feel if he were to go up to that installation? I mean, or we could just put it that way and just
put it
leave
another way. Come on, sorry. I'm not going to do sort of ventriloquy.
What I'm trying to get at is it seems like there's a question of technology.
You have something in mind. You have something you think he would say. So say it, and then we'll see.
No, I actually don't know what he would say because
Okay.
I'm not really familiar. But I kind of felt that it seemed to me that there will not be a total abolition of war.
Right.
Within that formulation that you were maybe sort of in that world that you were
So
thinking
you want
of.
me to respond to the abolition of war?
I don't want. I said it was tried and
Okay.
wasn't necessarily successful, so maybe I shouldn't have done this. But I kind of felt maybe there's something.
Well, maybe I'll
there.
just invite Rosalyn to say a little more. That's the way to get rid of it, right? But no, through the what
I'm
is
just realizing
tolerating?
I left out a whole part of my talk. But okay, go on. Sorry.
I'm trying to avoid asking the con question, so
Oh,
I'll
okay.
No, but why avoid it?
because I promised her I wouldn't.
Oh.
You can't. You don't have to avoid it.
No, but I'll do the question. I'll ask another version of the question, which is maybe about this notion of responsibility as tolerating, right? Tolerating, taking
tolerating our badness.
Well, it came about first as taking responsibility for the unconscious would be tolerating it, right? And I think it transposed to taking responsibility for our badness.
Right.
But does that transpose to tolerating war? Taking responsibility for war is tolerating war?
No.
Yeah, so why not? Where
Because
does
in Furnari's theory, taking responsibility is not, you take, see, I left out this whole part of my talk, I just realized, or maybe I said it and I don't remember, about Furnari's theory of the Omega Institution is about taking the responsibility, taking back your investment in state violence. Did I say it?
Yeah. Withdrawing
completely
consent
blanked.
is a...
What?
Withdrawing consent.
Yeah, which
what you
is
said.
withdrawing, he conceives of it as neither the individual doesn't become violent, and the state is not exonerated, but that the taking back of the investment is a protest against state violence, is a way of, it's not tolerating war. It's tolerating the fact that we're responsible for war.
Right, but maybe the question was, well, why don't we go all the way? Why not say, well, actually, we have to tolerate war? That's another way of bringing the...
Well, for Furnari, which I don't know if we want to stay with Furnari.
That maybe disarm, or to put it another way, disarming is... terrible when there's a translation, you hear the translator stop and then you think my thoughts stopped. If he's not talking, I'm not saying anything. Sorry.
Oops, sorry.
So, well, it's about
Taking
modification
individual
of...
responsibility is about holding the state. I think I forgot a part where the Omega Institution is a national institution that will abolish state sovereignty, but do it from below. Did I say that?
Yeah.
All of this you said.
Sorry, I'm like having a psychotic episode. It is about abolishing the sovereignty of the state. That the state will be, so therefore it could be a step to world government, but it is not world government.
And war is associated with the state, right?
Well,
Individuals
in the
are not...
sense that, that for Kant, radical evil, war was an expression of radical evil at the level of the state. This ineradicable. This is the link I'm finding between Kant and Freud, is that each speaks about a violence, a propensity for violence that cannot be gotten rid of. And that's what has to be acknowledged. Now, what's your question?
So your question is about how you get from acknowledgement to abolition?
No,
or?
my question is about this acknowledgement. That's acknowledged just with regret, or acknowledge and say, okay, that's also how it works. So maybe I can translate this. You talked about federation of states as, well, it'd be better to do something else, but we can't quite.
Right. So that's the negative substitute, is the
But
UN.
as though the positive ideal is still one, right? But try a theory of the unconscious with only one drive, it would never work. Right? There's a is this making any sense? That the multiplicity, that multiplicity is a good thing and multiplicity always goes with conflict, something like that?
So you're saying that, yeah, but the psychoanalytic principle is not to act on the conflict, but to acknowledge the conflict and therefore not act on it, actually. That was the Jacqueline Rose quote.
But not have any regret that you have that project, that you have to live with the fact that you have to not act on it. So it's not really trying to get rid of it, it's trying to learn to live with it.
Exactly.
And the question
To
is,
face
would
it-
there be a version of that with respect to war, learning to live with it?
Learning to live with the desire for war. Yes.
At this point, I'm going to let these guys back
Sure.
in.
Yeah.
David? Use the mic.
I wanted to follow up on Hido's point about the issue of who's actually firing the lasers, and I have
Who's
a feeling.
actually what?
Who's shooting the laser beams?
Who's aiming them? And I have a feeling. This is more a request for a clarification. I have a feeling that in this argument, or that you're setting up about captioning and things like this, it doesn't, in sort of anticipatory captioning or this dialectic that it doesn't really matter whether that statement, "This is not a coup," is propaganda, or whether it's intended to throw certain other ideas in play. But so I have a feeling it doesn't matter, but I want to hear you say why it doesn't matter.
Well, it doesn't matter because I'm not really looking at the picture. I mean, it doesn't matter
I know, but
in that sense.
But right.
I mean, of course it matters. It matters if you were doing something else. But I was maybe.
No, I know the picture was an opportunity, but you did set up this large structure, and I do that picture is so unfortunately compelling that I think I would understand.
That I should know more about.
No. I think I would. I think it would clarify for me the larger argument, just to think about why that doesn't matter within your larger argument.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? I'm not challenging you on it. I'm just asking you
I see.
to amplify.
Well, what?
I can also withdraw.
No, I could return the question. Why would it matter? But that's not really fair. I suppose just because I'm sort of taking as I'm accepting that we don't really. I mean, that a little bit more knowing wouldn't really change my situation with respect to that.
Right.
Maybe.
Okay.
Does that answer?
Yeah. It's an answer. Yeah. Like
I think if I knew more, I would have talked about something else. So I reacted to it as maybe it was just that I was sitting in it, not really, but I was kind of sitting in one of your chairs with sensors, and I just went, okay, it's not a coup, it's not a pipe, but in this case, it is a coup that we're being shown and told it's not, and I just went off in another direction.
Oh yeah, no, I know you were riffing. It was just, it was really more. I mean, I would have done the same thing. With probably less knowledge, but it was more a question of now that you've launched this meditation off of it. I really wasn't disagreeing with you. I was just eager to hear how that question would integrate into the larger structure you set up. It wasn't
Maybe
pointing to an inadequacy in the argument. Exactly. I'm asking for more riffage.
I'm going to let you off the hook by giving another questioner a chance here.
You just wanted me to get to kicking the camera until it dies. Yes, you did. Which is one of the places this could have ended. Okay.
Thanks both of you for your talks. It's really a question for Rosalyn, but I think it might spill over into Olivia's presentation. I wanted to ask a question using a metaphor from medicine or physiognomy, because it appeared to me that the method that you've been describing works to, it's a medicinal kind of process, but instead of treating a symptom, like a sore throat or, runny
Funny you should mention that.
nose, yeah. You introduce the pathogen either as a homeopathic, in the way that homeopathy works, you take the pathogen to inoculate yourself before contracting the disease from...
Talk a little more into the microphone so these guys can hear you.
So it appears that you're describing something that's homeopathic, or it's akin to a kind of DNA engineering or DNA re-engineering of society. And so, first of all, I'm thinking, well, what are the side effects of that going to be? Because there's bound to be side effects of some kind. But more to the point, and more interestingly, I think, is that it appeared to me that there was a focus on subjects and a direct causal correlation between the subject of the individual and the subject of the state, and that if you can treat one part, then it will somehow directly, causally change another. Mm-hmm. And so my question, which is abstract at this stage, is to ask, where are objects in this? Is there a point at which objects can be seen to have agency within this process?
Oh, the object having agency.
Or
I think the object, if we're working with your metaphor, which is like the medical model, which I realize I sort of started, but I'm really thinking more of a psychoanalytic model than a medical model. Then the object would be the arc, right, which stands for the culture. So, and I think that Vedichko is attempting, this is what's different from his peacemaking proposal. This is the difference between his and the earlier peacemaking proposals, Fernari's and Kant's, which are more classical paradigms, is that it's not a lawmaking. His is not a lawmaking proposal, it's a public and cultural proposal. So the attempt, I think, is, I don't know if this actually has anything to do with the agency of the object, but the idea would be to transform the war culture represented by the arc into an unwar culture. So it's not a legal solution that he's proposing. Not that he would be against international law, but it doesn't see that as the solution. Does that answer you at all?
Yeah, I suppose I'm thinking, it's tricky thinking about the arc as an object,
right,
as such, and I suppose what I'm thinking is actually more to do with images, a more kind of standard understanding of images, which has been dealt with mostly through the conference, whereby we've largely been hearing papers about and discussing the flow of language and consequently the flow of law through images or because of images, and images as catalyst. And so I just wanted to, I just sort of felt that there had been a missing point whereby the image as object itself seems to have been...
Well, I think some of the ways the image has been talked about here in the conference is not the way I think of an image. I think of an image not as an entity, but as a relationship with a subject. So I wouldn't separate them in the same way. And I think this, I'm not saying that everybody talked about it this way, but I think it's very important to realize that an image is an object framed for a viewer, and then to think about the nature of the viewer.
I think that approaches the core of my point, which is that what also is omitted from the discussions are discussions of truth or truths as objects. A truth is a kind of object. It's a solid thing, in metaphorically speaking. Yeah, sorry, it's difficult, isn't it? we only have these metaphors. And it produces, it is an inevitability. A truth is an inevitability.
A true what?
A truth is...
A truth value, did you say?
A truth.
Just a truth.
Truth.
In the image.
No,
Per se.
just
Per se, philosophically speaking. And it's something that can't be avoided. A truth is something that you can't evite, if you like. You can't, go around it. You can't negotiate it. So I meant, in a way, I realize this is abstract, but how that understanding of the object as a truth or an inevitability or something that we can't shun or avoid plays into these discourses.
So the object isn't the image, the object is a truth? You're saying?
Yeah.
That's... Because to me, they're two very different things. I mean, an image to me is, insofar as it's a relationship with a subject, it's an image. An image is an object of desire. It has nothing to do with truth. So what is the question?
I guess it's a political question in a way, trying to rethink the field, as Olivia was talking about, rethink the field of claims away from subjectivities, away from subjects and subjectivities towards thinking objects and objectivities. Because, as we've seen through history, there's repetitions and, regressions and eternal returns of similar problems, whereby modificatory modes of politics reform, they're reformatory rather than revolutionary, if you like, and even the revolutionary politics ends up being reformist, and so it's really a question of...
Especially revolutionary.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's really a question of thinking politics differently.
That's what I think the psychoanalytic model offers, but not by turning away from subjectivity, but by turning more towards it, and depending on how one conceives of the subject.
I'll give Amanda the last question. I know Suhail had a question, but then he disappeared, so...
I'll ask it.
Okay, you'll ask Suhail's question.
Oh, with the voice.
I'm going to try. If you can't hear me, I'll just ask you later. But I just wanted to try and crowbar this in. I was really interested, Rosalyn, in your, the artwork itself, of course. And in terms of that, I wanted to kind of ask you to maybe expand a little on the idea of education and the institution, the model that the artwork takes is an educationalist model, which, as we know, is not without ideology. It's institutional, as you say. And I was interested to think through the education towards consciousness that the institution produces, the consciousness of duty and responsibility, in terms of owning violence, as you say.
Of owning what?
Violence. The violence that one would often try to escape from. So I wanted to think really, or ask you more about how that institution that educates us towards consciousness has its own violence in itself, and how that education, which provides self-consciousness, might produce other forms of institutional power that are distinct from the educational model towards consciousness? Or, on the other hand, is this a description of the proliferation of more institutions that are fully and totalizing corporations towards self-consciousness? Is that the product of this politics that we become, I would say, and a kind of inertia of consciousness is our institutional modality for the future? Because if this consciousness that you describe, this education that requires a violence to us, only produces consciousness, I'd be concerned about the lockdown, let's say, as I described in my paper, because I think I was dealing with something kind of similar, actually, that it would just produce a symptom of another form of crisis in terms of real political change, let's say. I hope that's clear.
Yeah. I don't, first of all, I don't see the project as an educational project. I think that's part of the program of the World Institute, is educational. About what happens in wars, all of that kind of thing. There's a didactic aspect in that way. But there are so many other, I think of it more as an institution of the public sphere, creating an institution of the public sphere, a place for democratic discourse about war, which in itself might help bring about less war. If we think about Chantal Mouffe's notion of agonism. But, and also, I don't know that it's about consciousness, because what I've been arguing is it's about responsibility for the unconscious, right?
What happened to the microphone?
Sorry.
I understood that consciousness kind of as part of that responsibility to understand and acknowledge the unconscious. So it's a kind of moment of acknowledgement that requires a consciousness of the unconscious.
Like, yes. Right, would you call that about consciousness?
Well,
Are you saying that's about consciousness, about bringing the unconscious to consciousness?
An awareness, an acknowledgement of the role of our unconscious relation to violence. And this artwork, it has a rhetoric of education, but even if it didn't have the aesthetic of education, it's the way you describe it still seems to be educationalist.
See, I think that his program, and as I said, it's all very provisional, consists of a whole array of ingredients, one of which, and he insists on the indispensability of the psychoanalytic approach to war. It's not the only approach to war that that would take place. Obviously, there would be, he talks about many different, a study, like a research institute, both into the arc itself as a kind of, as I said, example of culture of war, but also almost like a model of the human subject, I think. Maybe that's where the object comes in, I don't know. So I think, now, so you're thinking of the psychoanalytic project as the bringing to consciousness of what is repressed? And you're questioning that?
Sorry,
that would make the educational institution into a reformatory for consciousness.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
No, know that you can think about psychoanalysis that
Don't
way.
whisper.
Oh,
I just talk.
where's my little? Oh.
It's there.
I don't know that you can think about psychoanalysis as educational in that way, as a pedagogical project.
Well, that might be where the institution is not exactly the same as psychoanalysis. Right? The World Institute.
Okay.
Or journalists, psychoanalysts.
Yeah.
What?
They're all the same.
What did she say?
Oh, she was just,
I was just saying, or they are related. Journalists, psychoanalysts.
Journalist?
she's quoting Derrida sideways, that's all, from her talk. Okay, this could go on forever, but it can't.
Okay.
Sylvia, I have to stop, so we will continue this discussion, I'm sure, near the refreshments. Rosalyn, Olivia, thank you very much.